Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Alan, would you start us off?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sonia, would you please do the roll call?
Commissioner Lack?
Here.
Commissioner Gurley?
Here.
Commissioner Eckel?
Here.
Commissioner Munt?
Here.
Mayor Lynch?
Here.
And Dr. Kennedy is absent.
We have the approval of the October 27th minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have motion and second. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. We have the payment of claims. Did everybody get to look at them?
I'll make a motion to approve the claims.
Second.
We have motion and second to approve the claims. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Staff reports, AJ?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. A few things to report on the Marquette Greenway Trail. The work continues. Our contractor, Gary Up Construction, is continuing to work on both the east and west sides of Salt Creek. Currently, the contractor is on site placing sub-base on the east side of Salt Creek, and we expect asphalt work to commence the week of November 27th. Central Avenue West, we recently received word that a pre-construction meeting with Dunnett Bay Construction, who will be the contractor on the job, is scheduled for Monday, December 5th. So we will have a report for you on schedule at your meeting on December 15th. And lastly, we have started work on preparation of the 2023 RDC working budget. And it is our intention to have that working budget presented for your consideration at the January 2023 Redevelopment Commission meeting. Also, or I guess before I pass it on to Mr. Rathjen, do you have any questions about that, those items? Okay. If I could, Bill Rathjen with Macaulay Bennett asked to have a few minutes of our time this afternoon to offer an update on his ongoing work in real estate.
Yes, I really don't have anything for you tonight, except I'd like to update a statement I made at the last meeting. I promised you the results of our current advertising would be in December. That will not be the case. We will not be opening the bids till January meeting. The 30 days doesn't start till the second advertisement, and we moved the meeting up a week, so we missed it. We'll have it in January. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Bill. I believe that concludes the report of staff, Mayor.
Thank you, AJ. We have no old business. Under new business, we have 8.1 approval of change order number 1 for trail corridor clearing.
Yes, Madam Mayor, Commissioners, the first item of business here is a deduct change order from a contract that we held with Homer Tree Service. This was the early work for the Marquette Greenway Trail project. This is a deduct change order in the amount of $6,500, which will bring the contract price or what we will be paying Homer to the amount of $36,500. The reason for the change order is due to work that was not completed under the terms of the contract that we held with Homer. If you have any other questions, Attorney Whitten and I are available to answer those. If you don't, it would be staff's recommendation to approve this deduct change order in the amount of $6,500.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have motion to approve the deduct of $6,500 to Homer Tree Service. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. We have the approval of 8.2, purchase of winter and spring banners.
Yes, Madam Mayor, Commissioners, included in your packet is a memo from Joyce Russell talking about her ongoing work with the banner program and requests to move forward with the acquisition or purchase of 90 winter banners and 90 spring banners, which would bring it to a total of 180 banners for the total price of $11,896.96. Mrs. Russell is with us this afternoon. If you have any questions about her work or recommendation to move forward with this purchase.
Do you have anything you'd like to bring up about the banners, Joyce?
No, and this will end, I hope, the larger, purchase of a large amount coming up in the holidays. The chamber has their banners, we have 35 banners. I spoke with Nancy yesterday at the chamber. Her deadline for ordering their holiday banners is tomorrow. At this point, she only has 29. So we have 35, so we'll have enough to do all of Central Avenue, mixing them together, and a little bit maybe directly around Founders. You and I discussed earlier about what we're going to do with the Hometown Heroes banners, because at least a third of them got torn beyond use again, thanks to the windstorm we had a couple of weekends ago. But I think, if we don't use those banners again, we will be able to stretch the spring banners a little bit longer before we put up the 4th of July, and then stretch the summer banners so we won't have to fill that gap.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have motion and a second. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We have 8.3, presentation of downtown master plan by the Smith Group.
Yes, if I could, I'd like to introduce Mr. Greg Calpino and Mr. Matt Reardon, who will be offering a presentation on the master plan. And I know we're all excited to hear about it. So if, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Greg Calpino with Smith Group.
Thank you. I will stay by the microphone here. So, well, it's great to be back. This was the center of a lot of exciting ideas earlier this fall, and this is the culmination of that process. So, and it's the end of that process, but the beginning of hopefully the next exciting chapter for downtown. So those, let's see here. We're frozen up. Let's try this. There we go. So those who, I believe most people in the room were here for at least a good chunk of the workshop that we had, but just as, quick summary, we spent a couple of months, just doing general analysis, mapping, looking at previous studies, but then once we were here for the 3-day charrette, it really was sort of a whirlwind exercise with working with our steering committee. It was really great being here sort of in the center of downtown. We definitely took advantage of the weather and the access to the outdoors to really try to make sure it was a plan that was grounded, down to some details. It's easy to sort of just kind of do land use plans and put models of buildings down, but it was really important. And you all pushed us actually to, kind of take that extra look at things and go out there making sure. And I will tell you, there are some things in the plan that are a direct result of some of those site visits and additional attention. So the site walks and field verifications and the open house, and again, really appreciate the time that you all put into this as well as members of the community to really make this, a well-grounded plan locally. Looking kind of, early in really kind of getting the night one, we ran with 3 legitimate different alternatives at really the whole macro downtown scale, as well as certain elements, things like the streetscapes and parks and things like that as well too. So we looked kind of big picture as well as small picture, and based on the feedback that first night, got some really good direction that people liked kind of a combination of a couple of the options, the intersections and the complete Main Street option, as well as some of the ideas for Central Avenue as well. We also during really throughout the process, we were looking at not only some precedents in a couple ways. One was, we definitely listened to what folks currently do instead of downtown, or in addition to downtown. Kind of what is the market for downtown. We also, really looked at some of the best practices in planning as well. Developing a real toolkit for, making sure that what we do here is really, sort of cutting edge in terms of how it's developed, how it knits in with open space, how it thinks about, the needs of modern communities with technology and equity as well too. So looked at a lot of these sort of toolkit elements that are part of the master plan. And then we built right up front a series of guiding principles that the rest of the presentation is organized around these. But these were, again, we do these often in master plans. They're sort of high level, targeted, and they're really meant to guide you through the master planning process, but they're also meant, once you have a master plan, they're sort of those touchstones that you gauge your actions against. Are you still meeting these as well too? So we definitely used them in the master plan and used it to organize it. So the first we call Finish Founders Square. It's intentionally sort of very tactical. This was something, again, really applauding the efforts that you've really put forth before you even brought us into this process. Founders Square and the promenade and development around it has really been a game changer for the downtown. It's a great first phase, and so this sort of idea of how do we take a really good area and make it a really great area was sort of the theme of this guiding principle. So it intentionally has a lot of small moves that are things that hopefully as AJ gets into his budgeting meetings in January, you'll start to see some of these things. It's adding a little piece of sidewalk, it's planting some trees, it's finishing lighting, it's starting to listen to folks, what they've said about parking, all those sorts of things that start to, again, really finish this area off. When we talk about phasing a little bit, you'll see that we really did make an effort to be very disciplined to finish this first before we start hopping over to other areas, which is always one of those things that happens in plans. You get sort of caught up in the opportunity somewhere else. We really wanted to make sure that this area was finished and could be all that it could be, and which really sort of sets the bar for the rest of the downtown. Kind of going with that, kind of back to those walks that we did, really thinking about, and what we heard loud and clear in early meetings with the steering committee as well as the community was really this desire to have this homegrown a local business climate in the downtown, whether it's food, entertainment, and we heard a lot of where folks go instead of Portage to do that. But we, more we got into it, we realized actually you have a lot of it right here with the mall itself, and so there's a lot of discussion in the master plan process of, do we move on from the mall, or do we find a way to get creative here through public and private partnerships to actually reinvest in those businesses? The chances of starting over and getting those kinds of businesses either to stay in new construction, to find new versions of that, I think with the advice of Matt and his group was really a good part of the workshop, was understanding, there are some things the public can definitely do in terms of infrastructure, parking improvements, and creating an environment around these businesses that are going to be good for them. And in turn, making sure the incentives are there and the partnerships are there so they can do their part as well with facades and some of the upgrades that are needed in those buildings too. So this was a really important principle that came directly out of that workshop, and the ability to sort of go out and actually see how the downtown functions. That really sets up our third principle, which was downtown, your downtown's interesting that it is linear. It's really a district in itself. And there really is, one thing good downtowns do often have, or usually have, some sort of drive or some destination. We also recognize, though, there is no, again, this is an existing downtown. This isn't a green field where we sort of pick some sort of silver bullet to make it all happen. We recognize you actually already have multiple bullets in the holster here with Founders Square. This idea of what we can do with the downtown as well as adjacent to the sports complex. The fact that you have a grocery store here already that is easy to connect to, a library across the street. Again, there's a couple others, but I think that this idea of really investing and polishing up some of the things you have already as those authentic districts as well as centers in them as well, versus trying to find, again, this Hail Mary pass of trying to attract something that every other community is trying to do. So this kind of goes hand in glove with that homegrown business reinvestment. And it really started to drive the plan that did create, even in a fairly small area, a series of districts they're unique, they work well together, and they will start to have their own influence on character as it gets built over time. And then again, those districts start to see how they're really anchored with some of those key centers within them. The next one, there's, as we observed through the sort of land acquisition and clearing over the years, you have a lot of green space. It's actually fairly well connected. We actually had one of the concepts we had during the charrette was the idea of a central park that connected everything. I think folks thought that was a little bit too much. We wanted to see a little more population development, but I think we definitely embraced the idea that green space in terms of some larger destinations like Founders Square, the sports complex, what some of this passive space could be even kind of behind this building, as well as the linear connections along Main and actually back over to Central, were all part of a really nice sort of foundation that this downtown could knit itself around, but also it becomes one of those unique aspects of it. It's a very walkable green. If you live here, you've got some, whether it's a place to kick a ball around, to walk, shade, those sorts of things. Those are things that are really hard to find. There are always some of those special ingredients. You actually have them here, so it was important to make sure we could protect what was really needed, but also making sure that it was a driver for the design. And then again, we spent a lot of time thinking about how the former Little League complex could really knit in to be part of this that fabric. With the new Main Street extensions and how it could work with the mall and that whole area. Walkability, we heard loud and clear. Again, quality downtowns are walkable. You've already got a great start, again, with what you've done with Founders Square. So we're just making sure as you start to, extend Main Street and others that you continue that complete street approach with sidewalks and paths and such. So as we complete the grid, we also complete the walkability with sidewalks. And really start to think about, a character that has this sort of quality that's, approachable, the right scale, very human scale and, again, pedestrian oriented. And then, thinking about Central Avenue itself, again, this is another place we had to show some I would say some discipline, because it's easy to look at Central Avenue and say, well, we got to do that first. And there are definitely some things that Central Avenue can do better. And it's not just Central Avenue, the road itself. What this diagram started to show was the ability to sort of finish the grid off and start to make those connections and celebrate the connections that you have, so that your downtown works very well with the areas immediately south. Where you have crossings, we leverage those for development and, pedestrian walkability, things you heard earlier. And so we looked at the idea of how could we take what's, a 5-lane street, start to humanize it a little bit. It's a 5-lane street for only a very short period of your drive. After that, it narrows down anyway. So we looked at different options to sort of diet that down, whether it was going to a 3-lane cross-section, or what's shown here is the idea of 2 lanes, a center turn lane, but then having street parking, which again is something that we think could be a good activator for downtown development. Bringing street trees, starting to narrow that. We heard about, the street lights, love to have more of a pedestrian scale. Narrower street lets us have lower lights. We can start to do some of the things that you want to do with a good walkable downtown street. And, one thing we learned through the process is, this street is getting to the point of its useful life and some things, the street lights, the pavement. There's a point where you are going to be repaving it, you're going to be replacing lights, you're going to be planting trees, so this is a chance to get it right and do it, when you're going to put it back in this way instead of kind of how it is today. So that's why you'll see we don't have this as the first thing you're going to do. It's very important, but we want to make sure that it sort of nests in well with your other capital projects and such over the next, 3 years, 3 to 5, or even 5 to 10 years. And then last was looking at, how this phases, I guess just kind of walking what I was just talking about with Central Avenue. We want to make sure that, again, sort of resist the temptation to, move on too fast over to, some new neighborhood. So let's finish. We have sort of phase 1A is the, Foundry Square Promenade area. 1B is kind of getting into the mall sports complex area and Main Street. We think that's, there's a lot already in play there. It would bring a lot of great resources to your phase 1 area. And I think also, again, showing that level of investment in the mall area, keeping those businesses, making them better, making them stronger, which is going to only be better for attracting the businesses in the other phases. So, once those happen, we start to show that, phase 2 could get into some of the additional mixed-use townhomes along Main Street and Vivian. Also, that's where we're thinking Central Avenue could come in, depending on where it works in with your capital planning. Phase 3, we've shown the rec center as a phase 3. It could definitely be sooner. It's a fairly big ticket item. I think one thing we learned in the process is it may want to be reevaluated in terms of what the program is, but also where it goes. We did move it. The current master plan for the sports complex has it right at the corner of Vivian and Main. We found some benefits to actually putting it at the terminus of Vivian, where it would start to activate, that whole area. It could share parking with the mall. It would block some of the noise and visibility of the expressway. It's a big building, which would have that prominence, so it's a good place to have a very tall volume like you would have there too. And so, I think giving it time for that to happen, but by all means, if funding was there sooner and there was a partner, which I think we looked at, there could definitely be some partnerships, whether it's, health partners, things like that, health and fitness, things like that, it could happen sooner. We'd love to see it happen sooner, and I think we got some feedback from the development community, they would love to see it happen sooner too, but we just want to be realistic with that. And then phase 4, really is the area behind this building, kind of going over to the grocery store. As Main gets extended, there's a really neat opportunity over there to create a different product than you have currently. But we do know that there's a fairly big lift to kind of make that happen. And again, what we don't want to do is, do something that distracts, the goal of finishing that phase 1 area. And, generally, this is kind of the tail of the tape, how things are looking from a land use perspective. These are all sort of rounded big numbers, but generally, the predominant use here is residential. I think we definitely know that we do need residents, walkability, it's the spending power in this downtown. I think we've got some good destinations with the retail and the sports complex and things like that you have here, but the residents here are going to be an important part of that too. Working in, selectively some office space, making sure that we do have some places for additional retail, which is actually in some cases built into that residential stack, and then other amenity spaces that support that, your recreational spaces, things like that. And then about 28 acres of open space that knits it together. And so when you put all that together, this is sort of a kind of a land use, a three-dimensional land use starts to look like. So, predominantly residential in some of the new buildings. Again, the scale is, pretty much consistent with what you've been doing, currently with the promenade area, 2 to 3 stories. Where we can, we've got a first story, retail or something like that. But this gives you kind of a general flavor of what things would look like, how it's knit together with the streets and the open space. And this is the overall site plan once you put it all together. So with that, I'm going to turn the mic over to Matt.
I'll just go.
Yeah, you want to be podium guy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do that.
I will advance your slides then.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, commissioners. And, when we embarked on the process, there were a lot of questions about one of my favorite subjects that I run across in communities is how are you ever going to pay for all this stuff? And what, moving forward and paying for this stuff, how does this impact where we're at as a community? And so what our overarching principle is, let's make sure things are to scale at this location. So when Greg went through the amount of retail and the amount of commercial and the amount of residential we felt was appropriate there, that's based on the market conditions. So, we did an analysis of what rents look like in our area and compared that to square footage that being developed. We looked at, once arriving at that figure, what does it cost? And, going through and utilizing, regional construction data about square footage and about type of building, we're real comfortable with those numbers per square foot and where they end up. We're also real comfortable with what market rents were and are and the costs therein. Portage is a place that had real-time data on new apartment buildings, and based on that information, it really does, and it did bear out where in that marketplace of rents, that's where we're at here, the 1,500 to 2,000. So, we validated all that information about this. And you look at the unique perspective that this downtown offers, it's kind of, you got a couple of base hits here already. You got a grocery store, and, you have some residential, and you have a little bit of density that was built in based on previous investments. And so, when we talk about this public-private development and partnership, so that's kind of when it gets into, the economic development expertise area. How can the municipality, how can Portage help local investors make the decision to do it here? There's people spend their money where they want to spend it, and they certainly want to make it back when they do it, okay? What we don't want to do, and that we certainly wasn't suggested throughout this process, was to over-incentivize or to give away, I hear this a lot, you're giving away the farm. Well, that's not what we're proposing here. We're proposing a partnership that this partnership and incentives get activated when the private sector takes an action, okay? When they take an action, you have the programs that we suggested ready to be implemented to go forward. And that's not to minimize the importance of a capital project spend where appropriate, and some of the things Greg talked about, finishing the grid and finalizing Main Street and finishing the streetscapes is also critical. So I guess, if it was easy, everybody'd be doing this, but it's not. But you do have some good ingredients that are already in place. You have an active and viable and financially sound redevelopment commission. So that's step one. A lot of places I go to are like, they don't have anything. They have a lot of ideas and not the financial wherewithal. I think it's critical in 2023 for some prioritization and thought process into allocation of redevelopment funds for redevelopment purposes. And I don't mean to editorialize here, but there's items that, as a traditional economic development person who sets up TIF areas and redevelopment project areas, when I do these, I set them up for a reason. The reason is not to fund a one-off or a thing. It's to create a system of developable properties along the way, so I get a bigger bang for my buck. So without going forward like that, well, I think you'll just continue to struggle. I think I know the economics. I think if you want to go ahead. The economics of what we're talking about in the commercial, retail, and rental, I mean, I sat there for quite a few hours and took a base model of one of the buildings, and I could not figure out how to make it work financially. There was always going to be a gap, and even when I increased equity, to millions of dollars and lengthened the term of debt, it would never work out. And that was the model where we had, I believe, 48 rentals and then I think 8,000 square feet of retail. It just didn't work.
I think it was rebuilding the mall somewhere else, right? Was
Yeah.
that kind of
And
what it would
just-
take to sort of recreate that, yeah.
You couldn't get the rents, and the subsidy was necessary. So you can go ahead, Greg. And so just to hit these real quick, and the mayor brought it up earlier, and somebody had a good idea at one point in time, and it kind of fell off the table. You probably want to get your Downtown Development Corporation put back together. The main purpose of that is you have a building that can be the centerpiece of what you're trying to redevelop, that has multiple property owners. That's the best way to deal with that situation. I just think it's unfair to ask a municipality to go ask 11 people what to do, and they're all own the same building. You're never going to get concurrence. So the way to probably get at that is through the Downtown Development Corporation and working with them. And that leads right into the second. There needs, in our recommendation, there needs to be a person who does this. If you think about it in this perspective, this group is entertaining the thought today, and the previous redevelopment commissions have spent millions of dollars in this area. Would you spend millions of dollars and not have anybody responsible for that role? Like, what are we doing? Where did our millions go? How did it work? What are we doing to get more millions? How do we get our millions back faster? So I think that's a real critical component. And then, there's going to be some required activity by your city council, and whether that is to have an ordinance that speaks to the ability to utilize flexible funding for through tax abatement, and how that program works, and what that might look like, through things like payment in lieu of tax, with maybe you're going to get some medical uses here. Those people that should contribute and can contribute. So there's some council action that'll be required. And of course, if they're going to talk about creating allocation areas and more of those things, the city council, as much as the redevelopment commission, will be engaged in that process as well. So what you're going to do here is you're going to heighten the partnership that exists between the redevelopment commission and your council, and move forward with having hopefully some people or a person whose responsibility is to drive your downtown. There can be an extra funding opportunity through your Downtown Development Corp, and you can do a business improvement district and all those things. But at the core of it, those will handle the facade and the maintenance and all those things they can. But at the core of it, you really need to get to where you have available revenues to assist the local businesses to be and do what you guys are asking for, and what the group asked for in the process. Greg mentioned people go somewhere else, to do things. That's aggravating. As you're sitting there, like, why aren't we doing that? And so I think this takes a pretty good step in moving towards that direction, and creating that, making the public investment to create the private opportunity. And that's not done without a rigorous review by you, by the council, and also accountability. You, as some of you are elected officials and others of you are appointed officials, and I'm pretty confident that nobody wants to be on the line for doing things that aren't in the best interest of the taxpayer and could be viewed as not doing so. So I think what we've come together here with is a participatory process that included a lot of stakeholders that sent us in a direction where, you know, the items that Greg talked about, the different nodes and the tactics, and then here we are kind of at the end of it, and it talks about how do we engage the private sector, and, you know, what those are the things we've outlined in the process.
So, thank you, and we're happy to take some questions and address anything that you'd like to talk more about.
Where have you seen this in other areas, this individual that you had kind of the contact or overseer? What kind of position is that elsewhere that you've seen?
It's a downtown coordinator, like downtown coordinator job.
Right. Is that a specialty that there's like people that do just that, or is it something like AJ, or not these not
You know,
specialists? 'Cause it's-
Well, I think where, you know, these are people that understand federal grants and guidelines. That's the first thing. These are people that understand, you know, the basics of business improvement districts and how they work. You know, oftentimes they're in, a person in a community has that role, but in any instance I've seen of that, it's a much smaller community, which, you know, with which, it's a smaller communities with less staff and less things to do. And so, you know, the other thing is you look at how do I fund this position? Business improvement district. That's how it gets funded. So you're able to appropriately identify the activity that needs to go in downtown, because you may be spending money doing some of these things now already, somewhere along the line in budget lines. So that's why I was talking about, Dan, it'll take some deliberation between the RDC and the council to kind of where are we spending money, and kind of what does that go for? And to get a specialist, and just to say, you know, your job is this, and
Find money, find tenants, find
money, find tenants, talk to business owners, talk to property owners. And like I said, you know, the premise here is you're gonna invest millions of dollars, you know, kind of make sure you can care and feed for that, and make sure you can see it, lead it to success. So that's kind of where it comes from. But
So is, going forward, we've developed, you know, not only this plan, multiple plans, and worst thing we can do is accept this plan and sit. And as AJ starts developing his budget for the next year, me personally, and discussions with other people, I think we'd like to see some sort of action, something taking place next year. Would it be feasible to, 1A, I think it's 1A was the Founders Square portion of it. Though that's, it seems like something that could be budgeted for and possibly move forward next year. And concurrent with that, kind of what Matt was saying about identifying an individual or a group of people, or however it is, to start with the downtown, what was it called again? Downtown Development Corp.
Yeah.
You know, because that's probably going to take some time, right? And identify like the Portage Mall is helping out those existing businesses moving forward and stuff like that. Does that sound like a feasible move forward?
Yeah, so like what's on the screen here is very much a phasing from a physical capital projects perspective. At the same time, there are, you know, sort of the people and process goes at the same time. There's finding that position and filling it. There are some conversations about incentives. So there's sort of administrative things that happen along with these at the same time. But yeah, we viewed that this phase 1A and B were, you know, very realistic. You know, if you just sort of stick to what you're doing right now, there's some things that are already in motion. There's some things that are, you know, you've done a great job of you know, the Vivian, you know, the street's supposed to be there, you know, so it's you know, it's sort of finishing that planning process. You've started working on the sports complex. You know, and so, you know, we thought that those were things in the next, you know, 0 to 2, 0 to 3 years, all could be very realistic, and things that, you know, a lot of, smaller capital projects that could be, you know, part of, again, the budgeting that you're gonna be hearing from hopefully in January here.
I have a question for Mayor, when the downtown group was established, John set that up, right? Way back when, the downtown development group, when they set that up.
John Shepherd.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out what John.
Which
Yeah,
John?
John Shepherd, yeah. John did. So, and then it kind of fell by the wayside, but I think there's still the same kind of businesses or a lot of the same people that were still involved then that should be able to glean the idea back again. And then, AJ and I were talking today, and the way that the state of Indiana, that depends on how you view it. They view it as they've enabled you to do what you want to do, except you got to decide to tax yourself to do it. And locally, that's not how most elected officials feel. They're like, you have our money and we'd like to get more of it. And I think where those two kind of come together is you have a person that understands that, and that's where we're talking about, the opportunity for funding and grants like that. But also, I mean, how does it get paid for? I mean, these are direct, this is a specific area that are getting direct benefit. Specific area. So when you do a business improvement district, people pay X more for Y stuff. And, I think the best way to answer that question is to ferret out your budget and where the RDC is at, and then in concert, where's the council at? So, because there's nothing worse than asking somebody for more money if you can't tell them what you're already doing with the money they gave you already. So I think that has to be sorted before you would go to the funding mechanism of a business improvement district.
So Matt, we did create one when John was still with us. And we had a downtown development corporation before that. So were those nonprofit? I don't think, so those are now like no longer existing.
You know what, Mayor, I can take a quick peek, because if you stop filing your paperwork, then you get kicked out. There's a process through the IRS to get reinstated as a 501c3. I don't know, whatever, it could be C6, could be C3, whatever they set it up as. So that's gonna take like effort. It's not rocket science, but it's effort to re-engage that organization and to file the right paperwork. So, you kind of want to find out what the status of that group was. And then, you do the same thing through the state of Indiana, through the.
AJ, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought the downtown development group disbanded. So, and they had some money in their account, and that's when they bought some things and spent down the money. But did they dissolve their 501, whatever it was?
I know at some point historically there had been a consolidation of the Downtown Development Corporation with Petco, or what we now know as Portage Economic Development. And there was a consolidation of leadership of those two organizations at that time. Specifically to how did they dissolve one entity versus the other, I think it would require a bit of research to determine how did the Downtown Development Corporation close out their books, how did they roll themselves into Portage, now EDC.
I think that had to be back in what, 2008?
Or maybe even a little bit sooner.
Yeah.
So, Mayor, if that's the case, then it probably would, I'm sure I'm guessing, there might be some bylaws hanging around in articles of incorporation. If there's not, those kind of things can be developed fairly quickly to move forward. Then you submit the application to the IRS and the Secretary of State's office, and then you kind of wait a little bit. But yeah, that's something you just kind of got to get on the horse and do. You're kind of you're empowering the owners within this area to participate.
Well, I think the BID came later. I want to say maybe 2013 or 14. So that, I mean, there were documents, I remember seeing
I would
them.
imagine somebody had to do it, because it's, a business improvement district is a taxing function. So.
And I don't believe that dissolved or anything. I think it just, because the project was taken off of the table, that was just the end, but I don't think it meant that that was dissolved. So that might be another thing that we're looking at.
Yeah, I mean,
The reports haven't been filed, and things, it just becomes its own administrative.
so I would think, yeah, like I said, like I said, it sounds like at one point there was some momentum with all of this, and they had the right apparatus set up. I mean, you just, I don't mean to make it sound so simple, but you gotta dust off that information, with the update in the downtown plan. You might have a little bit of different, goals and objectives, but it's largely the same.
Well, I was gonna say, yeah, I think back then there was a similar but different,
Yeah.
there are a lot of similar, some of the same drivers existed back then. It might be a little different shape, different combination, but the same, a lot of what's in this first phase is, I would call infrastructure.
Yeah.
Which is what, that's what municipalities do well on, the P3 side of things, right? And that's, that's intentional, that a lot of it is finishing those pieces. And I think that's a lot of what was in the version back when John was working on it too, if I recall. Some beautification, and again, the things that we're working with those businesses, back in the mall area and others.
So that was resolved like back in 2012,
The BID?
the Portage Downtown Development.
Okay.
Was resolved by the state back in 12, so. That's suspected.
That's 3 paragraphs and $35 and a click,
You're back.
and you're back in
It's not as
business.
long as it used to be.
Yeah, not the IRS, but
No,
the
that's-
Secretary of State, not much a challenge.
Yeah.
And then the bid, I'm, honestly, usually when you have a business improvement, I've never heard of one stopping. Because usually the downtown never goes away, so usually it's kind of into perpetuity, or at least, as long as the downtown's there. And you have these participants, but, that's you pay extra for extra things. And that's the program.
Well, and there's new businesses there now. The front used to be Rosewood. They were in that BID. But then everybody north of them was not. That was what John was working on. And he had all of the easement rights and everything
yeah,
figured out when
right.
that got taken off the table. But actually, the Rosewood, that front part, was in the BID.
Sure.
I think early on it was called an EID, and then it went to a BID.
Yeah, Economic Improvement District, Business Improvement District, yeah. They're a taxing layer on a jurisdiction is what they amount to, whatever they're called. So, with that said, it also leads you, that helps you catapult into grant area and other opportunities when you have those things going on. But again, that's something that needs to be evaluated as a critical path. I think the nonprofit makes sense for now, so that you have a common voice of what's happening in the downtown. I think that would be helpful. And then you kind of, I guess, as you deliberate through the budget for the RDC and how and what level the council will participate, you think about what extra might the businesses want that we can't deliver with the current budgetary constraints that the jurisdiction has, and what might they want to have happen in this arena. And so, and it's this isn't a this wouldn't be a we, the city, are gonna do it anyway situation. This is gonna be, you are telling us that this is okay and you want to do it, situation.
So say in 2023, we kind of wanted to move into 1A. So then we need some kind of a projection of, since AJ is working on the budget, what would the estimated cost of that be so that we could estimate whether we could pay for it? And then, there's other things that I see in 1A that aren't in your plan, so there's some things I'd like to see in there that would make that cost go a little bit higher, so.
Greg and I were just talking about it here. I definitely think what's in 1A is absolutely doable next year. knowing the cost is important, but I think the projects in there are doable. They're not big infrastructure projects. And then for 1B, we were looking at, what is it, projects B, C, E, where we're extending Main Street, extending Vivian, doing the parking up north in the mall, and really activating that area. I think those are all doable to get, not done, but get engineering done and really have them put in place for 2024.
Which will give you better numbers as well, too,
Yep.
for budgeting
And
standpoint.
give us time to get the BID or whatever we're gonna call it activated.
Because those are just infrastructure. Those are roadways
Yep.
and sidewalks. They're not anything beyond that.
Right, so you probably, again, yeah, there's some, I forget the terminology, is people and process activities that need to be going on while you're doing these other things internally, so that you're prepared. Like when the dough's ready to come out, you got the group together, and you have this, everybody's sort of aligned, or as aligned as they're gonna get, doing the projects.
Matt, if you extend Main Street, is that property that the city owns already, or would we have to acquire that property?
I'm just gonna throw this out generally, I don't think you need to get any more property from anybody at this time, okay? That's just me going out and on. I think if there's a method and a way to avoid that for the, in the interim, I mean, there may be a point in time in the future where it's needed. I just, the cost, the time, the cost, and the benefit, it just never seems to weigh out in these kind of situations. I think you got your hands full with the mall site.
Are you talking about the Phase 4 piece of?
Yeah, I
of
think,
Main
Mayor, we
Street?
own
Yeah.
everything in Phase 4.
Yeah, that was the intent, that was city land, and there's probably a version of that it could be a road, or it could be a sidewalk, or, part of that was just to leverage the grocery store to the, the residents you have already there as well, too, so if the road makes sense, there's probably some benefit for that, but it could be something lesser, too. But our understanding that was all city-owned back in there,
Yeah, I think where this is showing Main Street, that would all be city-owned.
yeah.
And Vivian, for that matter.
AJ,
Yes, sir.
so whenever we wrap up this meeting, so you have clarity moving forward in your next month of doing budgets, what kind of clarity would you need from us as far as moving forward with anything?
What would help is to understand the commission's direction in terms of implementing the recommendations of this plan, and if it's the wish of the commission to move forward with the capital projects or investments associated with 1A, which are mostly small capital improvement projects that would require some level of design and a cost estimate. The 1B project, I think we agree that the 1B project would be more associated with engineering and design at this point, because that rolls into that parallel track of people and process. So organizing yourselves a little bit with an internal structure of the Downtown Development Corporation, somebody to lead the mission, working with then the business owners to establish that business improvement district. That would, I almost hear three things. I hear the 1A projects, if that's the desire to move forward. Mayor mentioned she may have a couple others to add, understanding, Mayor, what those may be. Talking about, and then moving forward with 1B, which would be a solicitation for services for an engineering design firm to move forward with those things, the extension of Vivian, the extension of Main, and work at the north end there of the mall area. And then within the budget, resources to move forward with staff and whatever legal services may be required for moving the Downtown Development Corporation forward, because that person will need that level of support. As qualified as that person is going to be, they need the expertise of legal counsel, possibly real estate. They would have a role that They can bring it all together. There's a lot of work for them to do, but they might need a little bit of budget so that they can make sure that their works, that they're able to be successful.
Well, I think that person's also teeing up phase two, which is a much more private phase, which is
Right.
getting in,
Right.
those sorts of, and even pieces of phase one,
Right.
there are still some other properties in phase 1A that, need to be, someone needs to be on the street,
Yeah, no
You know,
doubt.
finding those partners as well too, which is part of that job.
Right, and even like as an example, and I think I may have shared this with some last several days as we were looking at the document, in the Phase 4 project, which is Central Avenue, we're 24 hours away from needing to make an application for federal funding in fiscal years 27 and 28. So that, we may think of phasing in a linear manner, but realistically, we need to be looking at Phase 4 going, wow, that really lines up with federal funding, and then beginning to do it already here in calendar year 22, planning out what this community Portage is gonna be doing 4 to 5, 6, 7 years from now. So we're quickly trying to get to an application because, as we made our way through this process, that seemed to be something that was of interest. So again, as I think we talked a little bit about specialization and focus, that it's just, it's important. It will really help us to a successful plan when we understand what the community's wishes are, what the redevelopment commission's wishes are, and then just start getting to work. So Commissioner Lack, and I guess really to specifically answer your question, if the commission is gonna entertain accepting and approving this downtown plan as their direction, that's an important step number one. And then if it's the direction of the commission to move ahead with 1A projects, possibly consider some additional projects, as the mayor mentioned, beginning to move ahead with the 1B project, which is, Commissioner Zilli pointed out, is more of an engineering design effort. And then if we're gonna move ahead also with people and process, I'll work to develop a budget that includes the ways to identify people so that we can move forward with that process. And again, I think then that's what the redevelopment commission needs to consider. But I think I heard quite strongly toward the end of the presentation the importance of this partnership between the redevelopment commission and the common council, because this person that we're talking about needs ultimately some of these tools that will need that support as well. We can talk here about a BID, but we will need council support. We can talk about added incentives within the economic development toolbox. Those incentives will need to be constructed so that this person has those tools at their disposal. Of course, when the time is right, I think we all were pretty clear in the presentation that you just don't give the farm away. You work collaboratively to identify and find the best project for our community. So there's a lot to do in that first phase. Again, we always joke, it's always easy just to go build the big thing. It is these incremental and strategic steps early on that does require, we're building that foundation. And it's sometimes not the most visible or exciting project, but it does set the table for what is to come in the future as you're going to capital investments, and then you're starting to be better prepared to talk about program and maintenance of these new facilities and such.
Well, do you think, AJ, early on, if we moved forward with like Phase 1A, we would need to create that downtown development person? Or is that necessary as we move into 1A?
I think that it's the parallel track idea, right? That will take time. That may take a year or more. And if we don't spend that year while we may be doing strategic, smaller investments in the 1A area, I do think it's a good idea, and I believe it's the recommendation of these gentlemen that you would begin doing those things as well, because I think that, and I think we learned from the past, and I don't know, somebody characterized it is, okay, we want to do this for you, but you gotta want us to do, however that was said. So I think that we need to do that as well, because this commission, after we do engineering design, will be considering significant investment in those roadways, in those parking areas, in that great public linear space that was in front of some of the existing businesses in the Portage Mall, to enhance that partnership. I think you do need to do them concurrently, so that when you come out a year or 2 or 3 from now, when this commission's facing the decision to make those larger investments, that further down the road, it's programmed, it's maintained, and you can have a level of confidence knowing that you're ready to move on to the next project, so that we can, keep doing the next thing. So I do think there's a level of parallel tracks that's required in this first year. And I think that's why ultimately you gentlemen thought that 1A and 1B needed to go
Yeah,
kind of.
yes. That's why it's all phase one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, what's not on here is sort of that people process, but I think that all, to me, is phase one. Yeah.
But going back, AJ, if you remember, we had the downtown development thing, and people kept meeting, but nothing really happened.
And that right there is this group's responsibility, right? Is you are considering, I think you all agreed as we went through this exercise a year or so ago to get to this day. A year and a half ago, we all sat in individual meetings and small group meetings, and this commission said downtown is our focus. This is where we want to be focused first. We moved ahead. We worked on some strategic projects in CY 22. In CY 22, we also hired a team to develop our bigger plan, our bigger idea. So we did all of those things this year. We've gotten off to a really good start, but there's more to do, right? There will be some tough questions to answer in the next couple months. Again, to budget, so that we're strategic in that, and making sure that we identify the right amounts of money. If there are some additional projects we want to roll into this, again, I think from a tactical level, it is hard to identify every last tactical decision, but we all know there are those minute, I don't mean to degrade them, but they're details, right? They're detailed investments that need to happen. In terms of the Downtown Development Corporation, we did use them before, or we had a Downtown Development Corporation. They may have felt that they were lacking investment, lacking commitment, maybe lacking what more can we do? Maybe they were beginning to question what is next. I don't know. That was a long time ago, right? And I think that even probably then as Portage, we strategically felt that it was the right time to consolidate Portage Economic Development, or PEDCO, with the DDC. We had a director who we thought was going to lead our community, and for many years did a good job. I think there's enough work, and all these years later, I still hear the same things, like, well, programming Founders Square now, like, who's going to take care of this? Who's going to do this? The banner program. We have someone in our community who's volunteering to do that work after, so we know that there's a reason why Joyce is here, because 2 years ago, we didn't have anybody running the banner program. And it's all these little things, and, and Mayor, I know how much work you put into the holiday Christmas lights and that kind of stuff. And the parade and the July and the markets and the music. And there's so many things that I think a little more focus as we continue to make these investments will be very important. But it does start with the commitment of this group. This is the group. You voiced your support for investing in our downtown, and we just got to keep moving forward, which is what we're doing today. And I think if we as staff and as consultants, and your boots on the ground day to day, understanding if that's the direction you want us to go, we go, and we keep working for you guys.
From the organization, whatever it looks like, this is an organization that's essentially dedicated millions of dollars for this area. That's what I heard. And if you can't get enough people excited to participate on a board to determine in their area what they want to do with it, then we probably got bigger problems than worrying about these things. So I think, Mayor, it'll take care of itself, the dedication of the budgeting relative to, you know, the downtown area, and then having the organization. They ought to be engaged. I would be shocked if they weren't. You know, the age-old thing you see is organizations fall by the wayside when they run out of resources. And whether it was a change in focus or consolidation, I mean, it stopped. You could see, you know, thankfully for us, 1A and 1B are, you know, almost kind of laid out. You know, the allocation of the resources is where you're at now, Greg, and if you do it, it doesn't become another plan on the shelf with the other plans on the shelves.
Well, I think the commission has a decision to make if we're going to move forward.
Do we need like an official motion, or how does this work?
And I think we're adopting the plan, right?
I would say that's in order, Greg.
I'll make a motion to adopt the plan.
Second.
We have motion and a second to adopt the plan as presented today. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We move forward.
All right, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity.
Well, you did a great job.
No, thank you for the opportunity. This was a fun one, and, you know, if you want action, it's there. It's laid out in front of you, so looking forward to it.
AJ, do you have the direction?
I
that you
believe I'm
need?
in good shape, and what I would like to do over the course of the next 2 months is we build the working budget for 2023, is to have some touch points with you all over the course of the next couple months, so that, you know, I could get a little, like a gauge or a temperature as to if I'm proceeding correctly. But I believe I understand that the Redevelopment Commission would like to move forward with some of the suggestions in 1A. They would like to move forward with engineering design services related to 1B, begin thinking about people and process. So those are, I think, the 3 things I heard from the commission. So I will start there, and if I've missed something, or if there's some nuance in one of those things that we need to get back to, I'll do that in partnership with you all in the course of the next month and a half.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Is there any other business to come before this commission at this time? If not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone.
So I do have my own.